to speak to my two amendments, F1 and H1. I'm sure it's no surprise that Green Party policy is a bit more radical than the policies of other parties, and therefore, for me, there's a lot of grumbling behind me. I just hope that's support and not criticism. I'm sure it's no surprise. Sure, it's no surprise that the Green Party is firmly against crackdowns on protest and the oppressive measures in this bill against Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities. So personally, I would throw the bill out. If there were any chance of filibustering it, I would stay here in, well, several days in a row. But that isn't looking likely. So, as the noble Lord Coker said, I do accept what's happening today, but with a very bad grace, and I should probably sit here snarling when we let this through. I just want to say one thing, actually, that I'm so glad I'm not on that side of the chamber with the noble Lord Vernon shouting at you. That must be very distressing, and it's great being behind him here. I think the vast majority of the British public, and I like to think that sometimes I do speak for them, they actually agree that a potential ban on noisy protests is ridiculous. And of course, we've heard some of the more ridiculous things that the government said already. And I do quite often feel really, really sorry for the front bench over there who've got to come out and actually speak in favour of some of the stuff this government cooks up, which is clearly ridiculous. And some of this stuff as well, it's going to make things more difficult for the police. The police already have reputational problems with the general public, and this is going to make it worse for them, because if they get tired or annoyed, they're likely to do something that will upset a lot of people, and cases will come to court and all that sort of thing. It's actually not good for anyone. I've also noticed this tendency to talk about protesters as if they're not people. Now, my experience of protest, which is probably similar to some other noble lords here, is that protesters are people. And you might think they're all hippies and people like that, but actually they're not. Some of them are ratepayers. You know, some of them earn a living and pay their taxes and things like that. And, you know, they actually don't approve of crackdowns on protest, because there are times when they want to protest. They want to protest about a crossing that's in the wrong place, in their own road, or they want to complain about cars idling outside their children's school. People protest, and it's all very well to call them protesters, but actually they are just people. Now, on the obstruction of the highway, I don't like the Commons amendment, and I'm not persuaded by the fact that there was a huge majority in the other place supporting the government on this, because what else can you expect with an 80-plus majority? And I don't like the original Lord's amendment. I think that was an absolute blunder, because obstructing the highway shouldn't land anyone in prison for a year, especially, and there's a point in here about how you can actually still be put into prison for a year, even if the road's been already closed by a traffic authority. So, for example, up in Sheffield, when roads were closed, sometimes quite minor roads closed, for trees to be cut down, which local people were absolutely furious about and did their best to stop, and they did actually protest in those closed roads, they could have faced up to 51 weeks in prison for doing that on their own roads, trying to protect their trees. Peaceful protesters should never be facing jail. So the original amendment was bad, and the compromise was bad and is bad. And we had the opportunity to throw this out completely, but sadly, the usual channels made it impossible to do that. And if I thought I could convince enough people, including people like the noble Lord Panic, the noble and learned Lord Panic, if I thought I could convince people like that, I would push to a vote. But I didn't even have enough voices to get a proper vote at report stage, so I'll just stick to sulking over here. But I think that the government's badly misunderstood the British public and what the British public thinks about protest, because actually protest is something that we accept is part of our democracy. And the government in other bills, like the Elections Bill, is suppressing democracy. And here it is suppressing democracy again. I'm absolutely devastated that we're allowing this bill through.